Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. We got a great interview for you today, but before we begin, head down in the show notes. You're going to see all the links to all the things that we talked about in this podcast today, as well as links to our social media and also our YouTube channel, so you can see my beautiful glow of my face on the YouTube videos. Not really.
Not sure where you were going with that one.
You know, sometimes you gotta job shop the dad jokes. So gotta job.
Sometimes they land and
Sometimes they crash.
sometimes
into
they
the
crash.
side of the mountain.
Sometimes they crash.
It is what it is. So today, who are we interviewing?
Yeah, Kristina Garner from Blossom and Root. We
You may or
are
may not
so
have heard of her.
excited.
We've had multiple podcasts on this.
Yeah, we really love Blossom and Root. We did the early years with our kindergartner when she was in preschool. We're going to be doing it again with our younger.
It is our recommended preschool curriculum.
Yeah, it's our favorite one. If you're just starting out and you have really littles, definitely look into it. It's nature-based. We're going to be doing the nature portion and some STEM parts of it with our kindergartner later this year. So really exciting to talk to Christina. Not only is she a creator, but a homeschool mom and had lots of interesting stuff.
That was
to
a
talk
great
about.
little wrinkle in the interview. A lot of times when we're interviewing creators and really really smart people in the industry, we really just talk about the business and stuff. It was really awesome to get into her. She's actively homeschooling, right?
Right,
She's
her
got
kids are still
second and fourth grader, right?
young and homeschooling. So
It's amazing.
yeah, it was really fun. She was lovely. We've wanted to get her on the show for a while, and as you can imagine, she's been so busy. She's put out lots of updates and things lately and creating new curriculum. So anyway, don't want to take up any more time because this was a little bit of a long interview. Give you plenty of
It's
time.
well worth the time.
But we do want to thank you, members of our community, for asking questions. That was super great, and we loved having her. So without further ado, here's Christina. Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So for our listeners who may not know Blossom and Root and know your story, can you give us some background on your family and what drove you to homeschool and kind of how your journey evolved into creating a curriculum?
Absolutely. I was in education for a really long time. It was actually one of my very first jobs. I was an assistant at my mom's early childhood education center when I was still in high school. And I kept that job while I was in college. I actually went to school for theater in college. And while I was in school for theater, I taught a lot of different workshops. I volunteered for some after-school programs teaching, mainly arts to, I would say the majority was elementary age students, and continued working at the early childhood center all through college. And when I got out of college, I went back and got qualifications to be an early childhood teacher and later a director. So education had always been part of my life from a very, very early age. And it was really important to my life. And then I had my two girls. And that put a lot of things into really clear perspective for me. But I think homeschooling really started being a crystallized idea for me when we moved to Hawaii when my daughters were just about to turn 2 and 4. And when we were out there, I was working as a gardener and I was trying to find where I was going to put them in school for preschool or pre-kindergarten while I was working. But we were having a really hard time finding anywhere that we could afford. And we were also having a hard time finding a place that really fit the bill for what I wanted for them. And it was really stressing me out. And I started thinking about why am I so apprehensive? And I I think a lot of it had to do with my education background. I worked with a lot of kids for a long time. I would have kids that would come into the center at age 2 or 3, and they would be in my life until they were much older. And actually, a lot of them were in my life until they aged out of the program at age 12. And so I saw them, being in love with learning when they were little and loving coming to school when they were in pre-K and in my kindergarten class. I taught kindergarten for a really long time there. And then they would go off to public school and they would be with me for the summers. And I would just see so many of them not being served by that system. And when they would come back to me during the summer, a lot of them had lost a lot of that spark and that light when it came to school and education and learning. And I think that was really kind of soaking into me while we were in Hawaii away from it. And I think that had a lot to do with my decision ultimately, that I didn't know that school was the fit that I wanted for them. I wanted something that was more customizable to their interests and their passions and the values that we as a family hold. So I started to think really seriously about it, especially with my background. I felt very qualified in teaching them at home right from the get-go. So I was like, why haven't I ever really sat down and considered this before? So I started looking for curriculum, and I would find parts of things that I liked, but nothing that was really what I wanted as a whole. And so I was like, well, I know what I want. So I'm going to start writing it for them. And about, halfway through the early years curriculum, it kind of occurred to me that there might be other parents out there that were looking for something similar to what I was looking for. So I made the switch to not just make that for myself, but also make it for other families who were looking for something similar. So that's really where Blossom and Root was born. And when we came back to Colorado, after we left Hawaii, we just continued it and it continued growing. So here we are.
Were there any homeschooling? Well, maybe a better question is, when you decided that moment that you were going to homeschool,
Mhm.
had you done a lot of research in homeschooling? Was it something that you were you were knowledgeable about? You had done a lot of research, you had learned about a lot of educational philosophies, or was it something that just kind of pulled you there?
Well, I had studied a lot of educational philosophies when I went back to school to get my teaching qualifications for early childhood.
Okay.
We learned about Charlotte Mason when I went back for those to get those qualifications. We focused a lot on her actually,
Hmm.
and at that point, I started looking into it lightly, but I didn't think it was something that I would ever be able to do at that stage in my life. So it was kind of just in the back of my head. And when we moved to Hawaii, that's when I really started researching it more. And before making the decision with my husband that we were going to do that, I did spend a lot of time looking into homeschooling. So, yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, and you're obviously, you have a very popular curriculum, but it's always interesting to even hear from parents. We have a lot of parents that they're making that decision, or they have the idea, or some of them are having to deal with having their kids go back to school this year because they were kind of a homeschooling COVID homeschooler. So it's always interesting to hear how people make that decision, and it's always we've interviewed a number of people, and it's always a different way, a different path,
Yeah,
to that same
interesting.
thing.
What pulls them in. So when you're doing your studies and thinking like, okay, I'm going to create this curriculum, and you knew what you wanted, and can you talk about how Charlotte Mason and Waldorf and putting those together felt right for your family, and kind of give our listeners an overview and a reminder on those philosophies?
Yeah, those two really stuck out to me when I was doing my earlier research, and even as far back as when I was getting my teaching qualifications for early childhood. The two of those really stuck out for me, but they weren't by themselves the right fit for my family as they are as a whole. I hope that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I had to sit down and I was like, okay, what is it that I'm drawn to from each of these, and is there a way to put them together? Because they're really, in my opinion, there's a lot of elements that they share. And so I think they fit together nicely when you're not trying to do them from a purist approach. So I would say for Charlotte Mason, there were a lot of things I really loved about it. I loved the focus on literature and lots of books. I loved the focus on nature and art and music. And I loved the concept of the child coming to you as a whole person that that has ideas and that has their own opinions about things. And so instead of trying to build up a person, you're presenting them with lots of things to pick and choose what speaks to them. So that's what I liked the most about her philosophy. And I would say also, I really like the way language arts is managed, especially in elementary with Charlotte Mason, with the narration and dictation taking center stage. I just feel like that's a way of processing information that really speaks to me. And I think I, without knowing what I was doing a lot when I was teaching kindergarten, I was already starting to employ a lot of those with my students, trying to approach them from that perspective instead of asking them, comprehension questions all the time. Like, okay, what did Bobby do after he left his house in this story? Instead of doing that, letting them tell me what they took from it, because I think actually narration really is an important part of it to me, because it really bothered me as a student when my teachers would try to direct my focus to really specific things in the literature rather than letting me find the pieces of it that spoke to me and going deeper with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
finding your own what spoke to you out of what you just read, and taking that deeper instead of somebody telling you, hey, look at this part, not that, look over here at this and tell me what you saw specifically in regards to this. So it was giving more to the student, and making it belong to them and their experience. And I really like that approach. So I'd say from Charlotte Mason, those were the things I took the most from that philosophy. And then from Waldorf, I would say, again, you have the focus on nature and the focus on art and making things, creating things, instead of just taking notes or what's the word I'm looking for? Like writing essays, to process your learning, but actually making something more tactile and visual to process your learning. And the other thing that I really took from the Waldorf philosophy was the focus on story. And you'll see that in my year 1 and up level language arts. We do a lot of retelling stories. So not only are you retelling it through the oral narration and the written narration, which is the Charlotte Mason part of it, but you're also prompted, if it's appropriate for your child's learning style, to do things like tell the story back with peg dolls. You set the stage for the story and then you retell the story with peg dolls or toys that you have at home or stuffed animals, or even just acting it out yourself and focusing on the story. So I would say those are the things that really spoke to me from the Waldorf philosophy.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about it, because we've done the early years volume 2 with our daughter, and so just kind of hearing all of that, the focus on art, and I'm just like bringing in pieces of what we've done. It's funny, we had not really done art with her, and kind of felt like art with a 4-year-old, like, I mean, that's just doing crafts or doing painting or something, but actually when we went through the curriculum and studying some of these great artists, it's funny even now, and it's been, I don't know, Matt, what, over a year since we finished it. If she sees a picture of Frida Kahlo, it doesn't matter where it is, she's like, I know that's Frida Kahlo. That's exactly who that is, because she knows, right? She goes, oh yeah, and she likes to paint and Diego, but he's always on her mind, and she's like, she knows all these things, right? Because she really remembered. She got really into classical music.
Yeah, the classical
because
music
of
was
the
a big one.
classical music part of it.
That's wonderful.
So it's really interesting. She'll recognize music and she'll say, oh, mommy, did you know that's whatever. And it's like, oh no, I was not aware. She actually got really into some of this. So it's interesting to hear how the art and some of that played into the actual philosophies. It was really great. And you don't think of it for young learners in general. I think we think of like doing crafts and you read books to them, and that's kind of, and you do a little bit of math with them, but to think about the arts, I think, is really interesting and part of the curriculum that we really loved doing.
I agree. So when you were doing the homeschooling and you made that grand leap to say, I'm going to make the curriculum for early learners and so on, how close is what you produce for your the early learners to what you did with your kids in your home? Was there a lot of changes? How was that process? How did you go from like, okay, I was kind of an eclectic homeschooler to this, I'm going to put something that's more formalized, or did it just start off formalized?
Well, I basically developed early years 1 and 2 as I did it with my daughter, my oldest daughter.
Mhm.
And then my youngest daughter had the benefit of having it already made when I got to her, so it was already written out for her. But yeah, I it was actually based a lot on what I did and wanted to do when I was a teacher.
Okay.
When I was working with the younger, I worked with a variety of ages from I think my youngest class was 3-year olds at one point, and then I spent most of my time teaching 5 and 6-year olds. So I had a pretty good range in there to work with. And I had a lot of leeway because it was it's not a public school. So I was able to do a lot of what I wanted to do.
Okay.
But of course, when you're teaching a big group of children, it's a little bit different than when you're working at home. So there were things that I really wanted to do with my daughters that I didn't get to do in my classroom. So it was kind of a combination of both what I really loved doing with my classes, but also what I really wanted for my daughters. So I developed it while I was working with my oldest daughter.
Okay.
What considerations did you make? Obviously, you know the learning styles of your children. What considerations did you make in writing the curriculum to kind of be more accessible to a variety of different, children's ages and styles of learning, and that kind of thing? Is that a consideration when you develop the
Yeah.
curriculum?
Yes, it is. And actually, I think you see it more and more as you go in the higher years of the curriculum I've written so far. But
Mhm.
I try to really emphasize that the curriculum is a guide for the parents, and I encourage them to adapt and adjust it according to their own child's individual needs. One example is when you get into the level 1 and up language arts, I encourage them to write for their child as long as they need them to, so that they can focus on ideas over mechanics in those early elementary years. So if your
Mhm.
child's not independently writing yet, I encourage them to write for them. Have your child tell you what they want to say and you write it down for them. And I also encourage them, if there's anything that doesn't speak to your child, please feel free to drop it. You don't have to keep it. If they don't like doing peg doll reenactments for the stories, you don't have to do that. You can use Lego instead. You can use Minecraft instead. They can just tell you what they like to do. They can tell you orally about the story. They can any way that works for them. So I try to emphasize over and over in the curriculum that there are adjustments that you can make. Anything that speaks to your child, feel free to double down on that. If something's not working, feel free to back away from it. But I do try to I do emphasize a lot of hands on learning in my curriculum.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of nature and being outside and being in the environment and how that plays into your curriculum?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the reasons we decided to homeschool was that I did not feel that it's a healthy pathway, not the one I want for my children to be sitting indoors most of the day. If I can help it, I would like them to be outside more um, during the day. So, and that's something that I saw with my students a lot. I would, the first couple weeks of our summer program that I would run for my elementary students, I had to kind of reprogram them to being outside more because they weren't used to it. And I just feel like a lot of the things that we need to fix are rooted in our disconnect from not just nature but from each other. So it's actually pretty deep,
Yeah.
um, pretty deep reasoning for that connection. And I just felt it was important to not separate the two. I felt like nature and school belong hand in hand. And as many times as I can find to put the classroom outdoors or make it easy for the classroom to be moved outdoors, I wanted to make sure that was included. And obviously emphasizing a lot of nature, especially in our early elementary science and our science in general.
Mhm.
We try to always have an outdoor option, especially as you get into the elementary science. There's always an outdoor option for your learning.
So, what advice would you have for parents that are maybe not naturally comfortable in nature. I mean, I remember we talked to a mom
or the fact that we've been locked down for a year.
Well,
I'm
we
stuck in
had
this
to
house.
get
I gotta get
more
out.
comfortable in nature. We talked to a mom who homeschools in Alaska, and she was saying that one of the biggest things she finds is that kids are not naturally averse to being outside in whatever weather. It's parents usually that kind of
Yes.
hold them back, and especially who don't feel comfortable, don't have the right gear. Like what do you say to parents who feel that we don't want to hold our kids back, but I don't really love being outside? How should they approach something like this, knowing that they want to get more outside exposure for their kids?
There's a few things I would say. One of them is to start small. I mean, you don't have to jump in and all of a sudden spend, half the day outside every day. Even just going for a short walk as a family in the morning before you start, or taking a break in between math and language arts to just sit outside together and have a snack, or, something as simple as putting bird feeders outside your window so that you can watch nature while you're indoors. Like taking are those baby steps are really helpful and important. And sometimes even like if I'm in work mode and I've been inside all day long for hours, I actually have to remind myself to stop and go outside. So, and I know, okay, even if I only have 5-10 minutes to take myself outside, it's going to be worth that. So, start small. That's my first tip. And my second tip is just to integrate it into your day. So if your child is able to, bring your homeschool outside when you can. That doesn't work for all children. And I will say that even if your child is going to really thrive in that, you're going to have an adjustment period at the beginning where they're going to be really distracted if you've never done it before by every little bird and bug and leaf. And they're going to have a few days where they're just really still getting used to it. But once they understand that that's a rhythm that you're going to do on a regular basis, they start to relax into it and trust that it's not this finite thing and you're going to be doing it more regularly. And then they start to relax into it. And when we do our homeschool outside, I always try to break things up. I say, okay, I'm going to sit down with one of you and do math while the other plays, and then we'll switch. And then I give them time to play together in between. And that I found that once they get used to that rhythm, they really focus hard when it's time to focus. They give me their very best effort, and then they go off and play because they know that I'm not going to sit there and hold them hostage for an hour, the whole lesson all at once. I try to keep it short and sweet, and they learn that. And so if your child is able to, moving your homeschool outside is a really good way to integrate more nature into your homeschool very easily. But that doesn't work for everybody. So when it's the case where it doesn't work for everybody, or where you live where that's not something you can do very often, just building breaks to go outside into your day. So maybe between, the first and second hour of your morning, always having that break time to get outside if you can, and just spending time outdoors. You don't have to build a lesson plan around it. You don't have to make it a learning experience, an intentional learning experience. You can just play or walk or observe or have a snack or a picnic outside, and having that time built into your morning. But then another tip I wanted to make sure I addressed, having learned this from experience, is to get good gear for yourself. So when we moved back to Colorado, I made sure to get my girls really good snow gear the first winter. So they had everything: snow pants, really good jackets, great mittens, good boots. They were very comfortable. They could be outside for hours, no problem. But I had neglected to get myself the same. So I'm standing out there in not good boots, not snow pants, not a good coat, and my really ratty little mittens that didn't block any water. And so I was miserable. So the second winter, I made sure to get better gear for myself, and that made all the difference in the world. So we're not just confined to being outdoors during the summer and the fall. We can be outside during the very long winter that we have here.
It's funny that you say that, because we spoke to that mom from Alaska, and she said the same, getting good gear, right? And so it's funny because I had already gotten good gear for our kids, and then all of a sudden the packages started to arrive, and Matt's like, "What is this? Why do I?" And I'm like, "Those are your new snow boots. Those are your new snow pants." He goes, when are we going to the snow? I don't know, but we're going to be right here.
We're going to be ready.
We bought all the gear, right? And he was like, "Is there a trip that I'm not aware of?" I said, "No, but when it snows, we're going to go outside with our kids because you're going to have these boots for 20 years. It's fine.
In the Pacific Northwest, you're going to wear them 3 times a year.
That's right.
Years.
So they're going to last forever. But it was very funny because it was just the packages started rolling in. You're getting new gloves. You're getting a new hat. He's like, did I need all this stuff?
Yeah, yes, you do. You don't want to miss out.
That's right. We didn't want to miss out. So it's kind of funny.
So you guys are in the Pacific Northwest?
Yep.
Yeah. We're
just
in Seattle.
Just outside Seattle. And,
it's so pretty up there.
Shh, don't let anyone know. There's too many people moving here.
Yeah, we love it. And we can basically get out all year long. There's really not a time that we can't.
That being said, it felt like January a week ago in June.
Right.
Yeah, I feel that. We had snow like 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago.
That's wild. Okay.
We're still at the stage. We still have one that likes to eat dirt. So we're still, that does definitely our outdoorness. But definitely, working, we hadn't really thought of doing things outdoors every day. And when we did, early years, we got the nature notebook and started walking every day, and our daughter's like, oh, let's go for a bike ride, but don't forget my notebook, Mom. I need my notebook, because we're gonna see something. It definitely changed when we just made it a regular part of our day.
The nature journal for the early it was a really cool feature.
Thank you.
A lot of us homeschoolers are kind of like overachievers. We do our curriculum, and then we always want to add stuff, and we always want to do more stuff.
What? You're looking at me when you're saying this.
I'm sort of looking past you, but not really.
The stacks of multiple bolt-on curriculums I'm doing together. What?
I have 30 library books right behind me.
You don't even want to see my
I know.
I feel like the librarian. I give her my last name and she goes, oh,
it's those people.
Because they have to go get our holds for us right now. And she's like,
yep.
Please. And I'm like, oh, it's booze.
Jack, get the hand truck out. The boozes are here.
Like 2 giant bags for librarians.
So one of the things I think a lot of people, they always want to know, like, oh, is this a good book? Is this not a good book? Is this a good resource? Is this not a good resource? You as a professional resource picker.
Is that
my favorite job?
Feel free to take that one. That one's yours.
I like it.
How do you make good? How do you know what's good? Like, Ariel, we'll be doing something and there'll be like, she'll just like blanket hold 30 books because they all have the same, theme or, this country or whatever. And then we have to kind of thumb through them to like figure out, oh, this is just not worth our time. This one's not worth our time. Yeah. How do you make those choices? How do you, the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah. What makes the cut into Blossom and Root?
It's kind of hard to put my finger on it. I would say, so there's like a filter. So you start out with this big pile and pretty quickly, and I don't even know how to put my finger on this, but pretty quickly you'll thumb through. And if something just is so dry and so, and it kind of depends on the age you're looking at the resource for, if it's just not going to speak to that specific age group very well, it gets shelved. And then you get down the filter a little bit more. And, if there's problematic content, which is something that I'm coming up a lot with when I'm working on our second U.S. history curriculum. I'll get excited because I've gotten rid of the first group of books, and now I'm reading every single one that made that cut. And you'll be like, they're like 34 pages in, 35 pages in, and there's just like this little thrown out thing that's completely unnecessary and ugly and problematic. And you're like, dang. So you have to take that book and shelve it. And by the time you get through anything that's really dry or not appropriate for that age range, or anything that has problematic content, it starts to get smaller. And so then I start thinking of things like, well, how accessible is this book? Because if it's a book that I'm using as a spine or a main book for a curriculum, it needs to be something that's relatively easy for people to get a hold of. So that's another consideration. If it's a really obscure book that's out of print, sometimes you can find those on, like, what's the name of it? Project Gutenberg or LibriVox for the audio. And there's a few others. So sometimes out of print books, you can find them as PDFs. But if it's something that's really visual and it's out of print, I generally won't pick it because, that's not really fun for a parent to look at on a PDF for their child, especially for a younger learner. So that's another consideration, is just something that's really accessible, especially if it's a spine. but it's hard to put your finger on what makes that first big cut. It's
Mhm.
just, and it's going to vary by child, because there have been books where I was like, but my youngest daughter was all over it. So
That
Yeah,
has
we
so happened to
we
us
yeah we
too. Where we were like,
like this
yeah,
is
and she goes, no. She goes, can you read it again? I'm like, I didn't like
really
reading it once. You
yeah, I
know,
know. It's so
but for
funny.
some reason they just
yeah.
connect.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
weird. It is hit and miss.
Yeah, it's true. So, that's kind of how you go about choosing books. How do you choose the focus, right? You've got every year is a new new themes, and we're going to be doing the kindergarten math and science rocket ship, which I'm super excited about. But like how do you choose what you're going to go after? That okay, we're going to do fourth grade and it's going to be this, and is that something that's aligning with what they're doing in regular school, or how do you make those decisions?
Not really, no. I have found that most of the time, the state standards, what they do is they pick like a couple of things from each branch of science that they want you to cover through the year, which is great. And that works really well for a lot of children. But what I really wanted, and I thought my children would do better with, was a deeper dive into each subject. So rather than going, okay, well, we're going to study this for 2 weeks and this for 2 weeks and this for 2 weeks and this for 2 weeks, I really wanted to have a much bigger chunk of time to deep dive into different subjects when it came to science. So early on, when I was writing, I think it was right before I started writing kindergarten, I kind of mapped out a really loose map of what I wanted to cover and in what order, specifically with regards to science. I wanted to start with space because I always taught space when I taught kindergarten, when I was still a teacher, and they loved it. Like, it was just the most fun we had all year was always our space unit. There's just something about that captures the imagination of a 5 or 6 year old really, really well.
Mhm.
And of course, even older, but it's such a perfect topic, I feel like, for that age, because it's imaginative and it's far away enough to really get them curious, but it's still something they can relate to and look up at the sky and see. So that's what I wanted to start with. And then when it came to the following few years, I wanted to start with the ground up. So we started with geology, which actually I felt like weather and geology went together really well because weather changes
Mhm.
geology. So I thought
Mhm.
they would go well together. So that's the first grade focus. And then I wanted to focus on plants for second grade. I wanted that framework to be there when you get to third grade zoology. So you already have the understanding of the first layer, and then you have the zoology. It's kind of like I start out with a kind of a general pathway and I refine it as I get down the road. You know, I have an idea of where I want to go, and then I carve it specifically as I go along. And the same for language arts. And
Are you looking for it to be your curriculum as it goes forward? And we have a question here from our community.
They're
Uh,
super excited, by
they're
the way,
super
to,
excited
to
about
hear from you.
they want to know like, how long are you going to go with this? Are you going to go all the way to 12th grade? And it sounds like you're taking like the kind of the STEM path in your curriculum, like keeping it circled around, as you said, the plants, zoology, oceanography, physics. Are you trying to do a STEM, focus on your curriculum as you go
well,
forward?
I really want to focus a lot on, yes, STEM and science. I
Okay.
feel like that's always been a really important focus for me. But in the elementary years, I wanted it to be more of an open invitation to explore your world and connect the
Okay.
experiences you have in the elementary years with the upper level science when you get there. I felt like it was important for them to fall in love with the world first,
No.
Mm.
through their own experiences. So actually, I do very much intend to keep building,
Okay.
but but I have to slow down a little bit because my daughters are getting older. And so they're requiring more and more of my time as a teacher. My oldest is about to start fourth, and my second daughter is about to start second grade. So I have to slow down a little bit for that reason. But the second reason is that I want a team for my sixth grade and up. So I really want to work with people who are passionate experts in their field working with that specific age group, because I've always worked with pre-K, kindergarten, and elementary students. I understood that world really well, and I haven't worked with middle school or high school students. So I want to work with people who really understand those ages. And I want to work with people who are experts in their field. So I'm going to need a team to develop the middle school and high school years. So that's another reason why I probably won't be able to put out one level per year moving forward after 5th grade. But I don't have a specific timeline fleshed out for the
That's
6th
really
grade and up.
interesting.
That is interesting because, I mean, if I remember back, that's kind of at the end of 6th grade, that's kind of when you went into middle school, and all of a sudden you had multiple teachers at that point.
Things really stepped up at that age.
Yeah.
That's
and
true.
Yeah, they do.
And that would make a lot of sense if you're going to partner with somebody to kind of create that thing. Let's go back into like more of like what your day-to-day like as a homeschooling mom. As you
Okay.
you are a creator, and you have a business, and you have a job. Some of us are just trying to learn how to deal with 2 kids. You have 2 kids and a successful business. What is that like? Help us. How do you manage your time? Go.
Oh, I'm taking
We're
notes.
all taking notes.
It's a challenge.
I can imagine.
I would say the first thing is that I get up really early.
Okay.
I want to hit the deck by 4. So I'm up early enough to have enough coffee in my system to sit down at my desk at 4 and start working. So that's step 1. I work until about 8:30 in the morning. And during the, traditional quote unquote year, the homeschool year from like September to May, I stop at 8:30 in the morning to homeschool.
Okay.
And we homeschool until about lunchtime, usually around 1:30, we're completely done for the day. They get the afternoon free to play or do interest-led learning, and I go back to work. So during the homeschool year, that's my schedule. And I balance it by doing a huge chunk of work in the summer. So right now, I'm in the midst of my big summer block where I'm doing the majority of my writing. So we do still homeschool in the summer, but it's super light. We only do 1 subject a day. It takes us about 45 minutes total. And that's just to kind of keep them fresh and keep them from having that. They tend to slide a little bit in math specifically over long breaks. So we just do a little bit of math or a little bit of language arts. We always continue doing lots of read alouds over the summer. That doesn't feel like school to us. That's just part of our lifestyle. So that frees me up. I still get up super early, but I'll stop at like 8:30 and eat breakfast and then get back to work. So I'm usually done working around 2 in the afternoon in the summer. And I would say another big thing is boundaries. And this is something I've had to really learn as the business is growing, is having really clear boundaries. Like, this is my work block, this is my homeschool time, and this is my time away from both of those, and I have to be really disciplined because otherwise I get really tired and burnt out. And it's hard to create anything from that place when you're burnt out.
Running podcast, homeschooling 2 kids,
Yeah.
Working full time.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
I totally. How do you? What are the? I'm just asking for my own thing. What are the kids doing when you stop homeschooling? You kind of get back into the office. Are they just kind of free playing, or are they outside in the backyard? I mean,
they're usually outside.
Okay.
My husband's home too. He works at home, so
Okay.
he's always around to help me with them as well. So
Got it.
I would say they spend almost all their time outdoors, whether it's warm or cold or snowy or sunny. That's usually where they are. I can see them really well from both places where I like to sit and work in the house. So it's easy for me to keep an eye on things.
Cool.
They do play in the basement sometimes, they have like a whole craft center down there that they like to play at and build things at. So they're there a lot as well. And my youngest, she has like this time in the afternoon where she really needs to have time to herself most days. So she'll take her time and go hang out in her room by herself for, about an hour or so when she's needing that time to decompress.
So how has the last year and a half been for you at homeschooling wise? We've asked a lot of parents. Yeah, I know. We've asked a lot of parents. We've done a couple series of homeschool journeys and also first year homeschoolers. And a lot of the first year homeschoolers are COVID homeschoolers that, homeschooling not by choice.
Yeah.
And it's been very tough. And it's been interesting hearing how they've been able to manage it. How has that impacted you? And like, your extracurriculars and all the fun things you guys used to do?
It's
How
been
have you
hard.
how have you managed it? Yeah.
Well, before COVID, my daughters both went to an enrichment program once a week.
Okay.
And it was through the school district where we lived at the time. We actually moved in the middle of all this to a brand new.
Fun.
Yeah, it was really, really exciting to try and meet people in your new neighborhood when there's a pandemic.
Waving from the windows.
Yeah, basically. Exactly. So, they were going to this enrichment program, and it was wonderful because they were around a big group of other homeschoolers that day every week. They got to take classes that aren't very fun to do at home by yourself, like theater and choir, things that are really not doable at home. So they got to do those kind of classes, and they made lots of friends. And, we'd meet the friends that they made there for zoo trips and play dates. And they were both involved in things like horseback riding lessons and gymnastics and dance class. So we actually had a really busy life.
Wow.
And, I made a point of us to go to live performances at least twice a month for that whole year before COVID started. And so we were really getting into a good rhythm of that, going to plays and concerts. And so when it stopped very abruptly, it was a difficult transition, not only for me, but for them.
Mhm.
And, Zooming with your friends is just not the same as playing with them in person. And having to move in the middle of it as well was really stressful. So it's been challenging, but you know what? That nature-based focus really helped us because I was like, okay, let's just get outside, so every day we go outside. If it's really cold and blizzardy, we don't go outside very long, but most days we're outside for a pretty long time, and that really does help keep everybody grounded. But it has been so challenging, and I feel bad because all these new homeschoolers that came in for COVID or even just to start homeschooling this year, I'm like, this is not what it's normally like, you guys.
We keep
It's
calling
not
it
normally like this.
Yeah, it's isolation schooling.
That's isolation schooling. Yeah,
Yeah, it's nothing like this normally. Like we would go everywhere. We were hardly ever at home.
Well, and I'm sure they're losing everything, and mommy's probably very busy.
Yeah.
Considering you've probably been very busy last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's been wanting your time. So how does you have two daughters, and they're they're 2 or 3 years apart?
They're just about 2 years apart. One's about to turn 10 and the other will turn 8 a month later.
So we get a lot of questions about homeschooling multiple children, and are you combining them into one level? What things are you doing together versus you've got to do separately for each of your kids?
It's a mix. So for language arts and math, I do them independently with each child one-on-one. For everything else, we do things together. So we do science together, art, history to a degree, music and nature study. We do all those together. Now, history, my youngest kind of just jumps in where she wants to right now because she's still pretty little for history. So she'll join in on some hands-on activities here and there, but she really hasn't been participating in that very actively. That'll kind of change this year because this year will be the first year that she's more actively participating. And I had to kind of problem solve because I had already done ancient history with my oldest 2 years ago. And I was like, I'm sorry, Blake, but we're going to have to repeat ancient history again because I don't want to do 2 different tracks of history for the rest of our school days. So we're going to do it together, and you and I can go deeper, and you can pick some things that you really wanted to learn more about that we didn't do last time. And we'll go a little deeper into those, but we need to get on the same page here. So hopefully this year history will be added to that too. But I do language arts and math independently. So my oldest this year, she did 3rd grade language arts, and my other daughter did 1st grade. And she actually did a mix of the 1st edition of 1st grade language arts, and then I was building the 2nd edition of 1st grade language arts that I just released kind of alongside her, like changing things as I was going along, making sure I liked the way it rolled and the way it fit. So it was kind of a weird year, but yeah, we do math and language arts separately. So we have a pretty good rhythm now established where my oldest is usually up and ready to start before my youngest. So we usually start with language arts while my youngest is still eating breakfast now. And then when my youngest is ready, my oldest takes a little break and I work with my youngest on language arts. And then I do math with my oldest, and then she takes a break while I work on math with my youngest. And then we do our together topic for the day, whatever it is, if it's science or art or nature study or whatever. That's when we do our together stuff, is after we've already done our independent stuff.
That's awesome.
And that seems to work for us.
So you're a former teacher, so you have the special magic pixie dust, and you know what to do. A lot of us homeschoolers, myself included, I also have 2 girls, and I do the homeschooling, and it can be challenging. What are techniques, and how can I be more peppy and more?
I'm always looking to be better teachers.
I'm always there's a lot of parents we see this question a lot. How can I be a better teacher? And what are techniques? Maybe there's a book you can recommend, or an article. Go read this article. You'll be a kindergarten teacher in 5 minutes. Like, and
if only it were that.
If only it were that easy. What are how can I become a better teacher?
I think the most important thing to start with is to take the time to learn your child's individual learning style and needs, and what clicks with them and what doesn't. Of course, that's something that takes a lot of time, and actually that's one of the greatest luxuries of being a homeschooler, is that you have that time and that one-on-one attention, because that's hard to do when you have a classroom full of kids, to learn each kid's individual needs and preferences. Yeah. So that's like the number one thing, is to understand that it's going to take time. And of course, as they grow older, it changes and shifts. So I actually keep a log. I got the idea from Julie Bogart of Brave Writer. Yeah. I keep a log of our days together. So I don't, in our planner, our like fancy, nice, pretty planner, I don't plan ahead. I actually just write down what we did and interesting things that I've noticed about them, or problems we maybe ran into, so I can remember how to avoid it in the future. And I think just being really intentional about your specific child's individual needs is the number one thing that's going to make you a great teacher. And the good thing is that parents already have so much background on their own child compared to what a teacher normally has. So that's number one. Number two is to be really clear about your goals, and as your child gets older, their goals, because that's going to help steer your decisions on what curriculum works for you and which curriculum doesn't work for you, where you need to spend more time and where you can spend less time. So being clear about your goals as a whole, but also like micro goals, like year to year or month to month, will really help you not waste any time or money on things that aren't going to help you achieve those, but spending them on where they're most needed. So being really centered on that. And I think that's easier as they get older as well. And then I would say feeling free to manipulate pacing. So if your child is indicating that they've already mastered something and they're bored to tears because you haven't finished the curriculum yet, but they obviously have mastered that content, like having permission from yourself to go ahead and say, you know what, I think we've got this down. We don't have to finish this just to check it off, Yeah. And vice versa. If your child is like kind of having a harder time with the concept, don't feel like you have to stay married to the pacing that the curriculum has set up. Like if you need to slow down and spend a little bit longer on this letter sound or that letter sound, or if you need to spend a little bit longer on the concept of multiplication, for example, like feel free to do that. You can, because you homeschool. You don't have to keep this pace because you only have X amount of weeks in a year to cover it, and you have 30 other students waiting for you.
Yeah, that last point is something that I've kind of internalized in the last month or so. Just having that, understanding where they're excelling and run with that, and then hey, this is maybe isn't as important, or you're just not getting this. I'm not going to let this hold us up because you're not having a good time learning that. That's a great point. That's something that I've actually had to learn myself. And I think the hardest thing about being a teacher to your kid is actually just like understanding, how being comfortable as a teacher to them. Yeah.
You've got this imposter syndrome that,
it is.
I didn't go to school for all these years, and am I qualified to teach my kiddo? And I don't want to mess up. I want to be the best teacher for them. I think that's harder in some ways. If we had a classroom of kids and we were teaching, there'd be definitely the feeling of, their education's in my hands. But at home, we feel like it's almost more pressure because you love them.
It feels like the stakes are higher.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The stakes feel much higher. So, on that note, let's talk a little bit about the folks who are really feeling that right now. Some families that are thinking that they're going to start homeschooling. They're looking into it. They're feeling overwhelmed. What would you tell them? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out and thinking, you know, "Ooh, I don't know, this is scary, or I don't know if I'm qualified. I don't want to screw up my kids." How do you comfort because it's true. I mean, everyone feels this way. No one wants to mess up their kids. Nobody wants to have
Of
that
course,
that
yeah.
kid who's 30 on Reddit going, "Oh, my parents homeschooled me. You wouldn't believe what happened." Right? You want to
I
we
have
want to
seen
give them
those
the
posts.
world,
Yeah.
right? So how do you assuage some of those fears? What would you tell those parents?
I would start by saying that you have to understand it's going to take some time to dial in your rhythm, what works for you and your family, and most importantly, what works for your child. That's not something you're going to know right off the bat, and it takes time to figure it out. So you have to give yourself permission to take that time. I'm trying to think of a good example in my own experience. So, like with my youngest daughter, I was concerned when I first started homeschooling her because she was not at all interested in letters and letter sounds and learning to read. This was when she was like 3, 4 years old. My oldest daughter was really thirsty at that age to learn to read and pay attention to that kind of thing. So I was kind of a little bit nervous, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to take some time to learn her rhythm and take some time to trust her process. And I just decided I'm not going to push it. We're going to do early years volume 2 when she's just a little bit older than my oldest daughter was when we did it. We waited a whole extra year, and it made all the difference in the world. And in that year, she just clicked into place, and she was ready to not only read, but she like really went fast, you know? So I feel like sometimes if we just learn to listen into our own child's specific needs, their own rhythm, that's step one. Step two is that you should not try to do it on your own. You shouldn't try to go alone. Um, find a network. And I know that's hard to do in this post-COVID world, but if it's just online, that's better than nothing. Find a network of other homeschoolers, ideally ones that have been in it for a while, that you can listen to, bounce things off of, hear the way they talk about things. Really, having that network is important. I feel like it's not a good idea to try and do it all on your own in a bubble, because you don't have any sense of framework. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no connection. So that's part two. Another piece of advice I would give beginning homeschool parents is to follow the progress of the child they have. So really paying attention to where they're starting at the beginning of your homeschool year and tracking their progress throughout the year. And instead of like trying to compare them to an age-based scale or a standards-based scale, like just seeing their individual growth throughout the year. I think one thing that helps me a lot is every year I look back and see where we started with certain things and where we ended with certain things, like physically looking at their work. And that makes a huge difference, because I think at the end of every homeschool year, we have that moment where we're like, did we do enough? What do we need to, like, what did we not do? But if you stop and look at, you compare, their ideas that they were having or their narrations they were having at the beginning of the year to the end of the year and see growth, that's what you're looking for. You're just looking for that individual growth
Mhm.
and that trend of moving forward and deeper. And I think when you look at your individual child's growth, that really can be reassuring for it's reassuring for what you have already accomplished, but it also lets you see, okay, I think we can maybe work a little bit more on this now, because I feel like that can be shored up, but we definitely don't need to worry about this because we have got that down. So I think just looking at your individual child's growth is really important. And then part three is that you have to be clear and honest with yourself about your goals. And as they get older, again, their goals. So if your goals are to really follow a strict, rigorous academic course, you need to be making curriculum decisions based on that and rhythm decisions based on that. But if your goal is more to give your child space to be creative and to find their own voice, that's going to change the way you look at resources that you want to use and stuff. But you have to be honest with yourself about what your goals are. And you might not even know that whole first year or two, even what your goals are. So you need to take time to explore different options, read about different homeschooling philosophies and learn about different approaches and look at different samples and kind of see what speaks to you and what doesn't. And finding a group that resonates with you, a group of people that resonate with you. But just understanding that it's going to take time, that everybody kind of wants to jump right into homeschool knowing everything about where they're going and what they're going to do, but it takes time and it changes over time. So your homeschool rhythm is going to change seasonally and over time as your child gets older. For example, I mean, I don't know, you guys have been doing it for long enough to probably have hit the winter slump, right?
Oh yes.
Oh,
We
yeah.
actually did a
Yeah.
podcast about it. We were like,
Yeah.
why do we feel weird? Why do we not want to do this
That's
right now?
normal.
Well, but then we looked
But you
at it,
don't
we
know
were
that at first.
We
there
didn't
were
realize
there
it,
were
yeah.
slumps. There's slumps that happen at all different times of years. There's like multiple
Yeah.
slumps. It's not just
And
one time.
we go year
Yeah.
round. We go year round.
We do
pretty
too.
much
We do.
full speed.
Oh, you go full speed year round?
Yeah, we go full
Yeah.
speed year
Well, I
round.
mean, I don't know. It's the summer is a little bit more like, we don't need to do that
Hey,
today.
I got the kids at the back of this learning hot rod, and we're going full speed already.
Well, they're still little, so we don't have to do quite that much. It's not too bad.
Hey,
but
listen, I can do endless amounts of Play-Doh and Hungry Hippos with the 2-year-old if you want. I can do this all day long.
I think it's one of those things that when you start, we kind of thought like, okay, how are we gonna? What time are we gonna school out? Okay, well, she's 3 and we have a baby, so that's fine. We'll do it at this time, and then 6 months later, well, the baby's got a nap at this time and this time, so she's got to homeschool at this other time, and then now the baby's 1, and now she's trying to get into stuff, so we can't homeschool while the baby's up. Now we can only do it at nap time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's all these other considerations, and
and they
it
change.
seems like it changes.
Yeah, it all changes. Like this week, it changed. Yeah.
And that's normal, and I've kind of saw that toward the end of our year this year. My oldest was like, I want to do more of the writing and creative projects next year, and my youngest was like, I want more math. Math's not my thing. So I was like, okay, but she loves it. So I kind of had to pivot where my original plan for next year was going to go, just trying to serve because now they're starting to assert what they're most interested in and what they want to do more of, and where they're needing more reinforcement. So that changes too as they get older, and it does take longer as they get older too, and then you have to kind of adapt that way.
It's constantly flexibility, and it's interesting how the things that really interested our learner when we started, and even they how they morph so much. We're just getting ready to enroll in our own enrichment program, a parent partnership at our public school, for some enrichment classes, and I had a whole list of what I thought she was gonna take, and how the curriculum at home was gonna like pair with that, and she was like, I don't want to take clay sculpture.
I have my own ideas.
Beginning Irish dance. And
that's awesome.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking I don't need to add in this extra art component because she's going to be in clay sculpture, and I don't know why. I just thought like, well, she enjoyed doing sculpture with daddy at home. Of course she's going to choose this. And she was like, no, Irish dance and woodworking. Right. So she wants to do woodworking. I was like, oh, okay.
See, that's awesome. But they do that all the time where you kind of like try to stay ahead of them and you're like, ooh, they're going to love this. And they're like totally not into it.
Right.
And they all of a sudden develop. Yeah, it is hard because how are you supposed to plan and predict that?
Well, and we get invested. I get emotionally invested. I mean, I buy a lot of different curriculums and I look at things and I go, oh, we're going to do this. And and then we're going to do this. And, and then it becomes clear at some point that, oh, she's gonna hate that, and I feel like I like die inside a little bit because I was really excited about doing it, and I had to remember that this is not about me. That's
the funny thing. Like a lot of homeschool parents do that, and I'm guilty of that myself too. Like I'm trying to also give myself the education that I wanted growing up. So we do that all the time where we're like, ooh, I really want to do this, and the thing is, you have full permission to do things that you're interested in, and that's something I have to remind myself. Like that kind of happened to me. I think it was when we were doing stop motion in 3rd grade. And I was like, Blake's going to love stop motion. She's going to be so into it. It's going to be her thing. And she was like, completely disinterested in stop motion. She like made a 2-minute video. She's like, I'm done. But I was like, man, I was really excited. So I made my own stop motion video. And then I was like, okay, I feel better now, but yeah, it's, I think a lot of us do that just because, first of all, we get really excited about putting something in front of our child that we think they're going to love. That's just love speaking. That's a love language. But it's also, oh my gosh, look at what education can be. Look at all the things that it can be that I maybe wasn't exposed to when I was little. I didn't have all these opportunities open to me. So we want to, of course, give those to them, so
it's a little bit of vicarious living too.
Absolutely.
Like I didn't get to do this when I was a kid. I would have loved to take this class. And so, I'm or study this thing. And so I'm pushing the opposite way. And she's just like, I was like, I bought the whole set of Sophie Mouse. I was like, these books are adorable.
I bought those too, and she didn't like them.
I know. And my daughter's like, I want to read about mummification again. And I'm like, I don't want to read about mummies anymore. We have read about so many mummies in this house.
It's so funny that Sophie Mouse happened to you too.
Right? But I read the first couple and I was like, oh, these are the cutest, sweetest books. They're perfect for a 5-year-old. Let's read the whole set. And she was like,
doesn't have enough dragons.
No. Yeah. She's like, no. I don't want to. Can we go back to Harry Potter, or can we read more about the Incas? And I'm like, no, I don't want to read about the Incas right now. This is adorable. Why don't you like this?
I picked this out just for you.
Formula made for you. So I think that's funny. Thank you for the advice. I know that for a lot of new homeschoolers, it's scary to get started and to take that leap. And so hearing from somebody that does it personally and then writes the curriculum, I'm sure would be really helpful. So we know that we can follow you on blossomandroot.com, but where else should folks go to find out information about the curriculum and follow you at?
I'm usually on Instagram. I think Instagram's the place that I probably hang out the most out of all of them. Okay. And it's at blossomandroot.com. Or just at Blossom and Root. Sorry. So I'm like, no, that's not right. Yeah, it's just at Blossom and Root, all lowercase. That's my handle. And I don't think I spend very much. I don't really post very often to Facebook. And when I do, it's usually because I've shared an Instagram post to Facebook. So that's the best place to find me. I do want to get back into more YouTube this fall when we start our homeschool year again, because I love making videos. I just don't have very much time right now. So I believe our YouTube channel is just Blossom and Root as well. But I'll give you guys the links.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put them in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah, we sure will. And there's the Blossom and Root Families Facebook group, which is a lovely group of folks.
It is. I love them.
I do too. And then we often do Instagram follow parties and things. So if listeners want to go on to the Blossom and Root Families, it's a private group. You have to ask for permission to join. But then you'll find lots of other families too that are also doing Blossom and Root, and we call follow each other. And that is super fun to see what everybody's doing.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time. We know you're going to wake up early and do a lot of work. So
I don't want to take up any more of your time, but we loved having you. This was just such a treat for us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!